Okay, the 2024 presidential election is moving quickly now. Last night, Donald Trump swept Iowa. Ron DeSantis took second place, Nikki Haley took third place, and Vivek Ramaswamy has decided to drop out and put his support behind Donald Trump. On the Democrat side, Dean Phillips, Marianne Williamson, and Joe Biden all went through the election, but the Democrats don't reveal who won and who didn't win until later in the year as they get closer to their caucus in South Carolina. So today I have a special guest. I want to be fair. I want you guys to hear the other side of the story. So I have presidential candidate Marianne Williamson. We had a great conversation. We went over some very interesting things. I don't agree with everything she said. I also don't disagree. So I want you guys to listen. Now, if there's something you like, please let me know in the comments. And if there's something you don't like, I definitely want to hear from you in the comments. But please give this video a like and sit back and enjoy. Today I have with me presidential candidate Marianne Williamson. She is somebody that is known throughout the United States and even around the globe as a spiritual leader. She wants to bring kindness and goodness back to America and has a plan to get us there. Marianne, thank you so much for coming on my show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I want to start off with you're running against a sitting president in your own party. Is there a reason for that? Is there something that has you nervous about his leadership or the direction of the country? What was your reasoning behind wanting to run?
Well, first of all, I want to point out that the idea that it's a strange thing to do is strange. You know, when I was growing up, Lyndon Johnson was an incumbent, and Eugene McCarthy and Bobby Kennedy Sr. both primaried him. Nobody acted like that was strange. It's called democracy. People primary incumbents in Congress all the time. People primary Senate candidates all the time. So I'm running up this meme created by the DNC. Oh, you just don't do that. People do that all the time. Now, for those of us who are Democrats, and they didn't do it with Obama, they didn't do it with Clinton because they were popular presidents. This president is not popular. I'm sorry, it's not my fault. The president is not doing well, particularly in the swing states. And for those of us who are Democrats, for many who are independents, and honestly, for many who are Republicans, defeating Donald Trump is extremely important. And many of us, myself certainly, I do not believe that the president's agenda is a winning message with which to beat Donald Trump. I think the way to beat Donald Trump, but much more importantly than beating a candidate, what's necessary to heal this country is for us to move in a completely different direction, particularly economically. Over the last 50 years, there has been a war against the middle class in the United States. I'm old enough to remember the 1970s. And those of us who remember what a thriving middle class looked and felt like. The average American couple could afford a house and could afford a car and could afford a yearly vacation and could afford to send their kids to college and could afford for one parent to stay home with the kids if they wanted to. There's been a massive transfer of wealth from the bottom 90%, $50 trillion over the last 50 years. And today, and this isn't a right-left issue, we're living at a time where the majority of Americans cannot afford a $500 unexpected expenditure. That's blinking red lights. You can't have a thriving democracy where you do not have a thriving middle class. The majority of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 70% of Americans say that they live with constant chronic economic anxiety. And we've got now, according to Yahoo News the other day, 39% of Americans 39% of Americans now say that they regularly skip meals in order to pay for housing. Now, that's an emergency. I'm sorry. That should be seen as an economic emergency. So the president said that he wants to run on the message that his economic plan is working. Well, maybe 20% of the Americans could say, oh, it's working for me. For 80% of Americans, that message runs completely counter to their visceral experience. Now, then he sort of moved that. Okay, we're running on the fact that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. I think the whole gang is a threat to democracy, because if you are a threat to a vital middle class, you are a threat to democracy. So I think, Americans are good at starting over. That's what this country was founded on. We were starting over. Abolition meant we were starting over. We were the new world. Thomas Paine said, we have it, we have the chance to begin the world over again. And that's what we did with abolition. And that's what we did with women's suffrage. And that's what we did with the establishment of labor. And that's what we did with civil rights movement. Americans are in a funk. Americans are ready to begin again. We need a new chapter of American history. And neither Trump nor Biden offer that to us. So for those of us who are Democrats, the biggest danger electorally is not Donald Trump. The people who love Donald Trump are going to vote for Donald Trump. You could indict him 91 more times. They're going to vote for Donald Trump. And they have that right. This is a democracy. For those of us who do not want to see Donald Trump return to the White House, the danger here is people staying home. The danger is people not feeling inspired. The danger is people feeling like it's not going to affect my life at this point, one way or the other. And that's why I'm running, because I want to co-create with Americans a new chapter in American history. We need a season of repair. We need an economic U-turn. And I think the majority of Americans are ready for that. The majority of Republicans, as well as Democrats, not as many, but still a majority, want universal health care. A majority of Republicans, as well as Democrats, not as many, but still a majority, want tuition-free college and tech school. So my economic Bill of Rights with those things, plus paid family leave, subsidized childcare, guaranteed living wage, these aren't even left-right issues. These are help the average American survive these invisible economic chains that are wrapped around them. And that's what we need in a president. And apparently, if you're so sucked into the political system in Washington that you are so buffered emotionally that you can't recognize how much economic despair is out there, or if something gets you to the point where once you're in there, you don't have the courage to really stand for that kind of repair, then it's time for the people to step in. And that's why I'm running.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. One of the things that Joe Biden said in the past that really stood out to me that I wanted to believe is he said that his plan was going to push the bottom up and the middle out. He was going to create prosperity for so many people. And yet what I've seen is the middle shrink and then sink to the bottom. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. So I don't disagree with you that people would like affordable health care, affordable housing, affordable groceries. I guess, how do we get there? Obviously, taking war off the table, not spending so much money trying to kill everybody around the world would be one way to do that. What are some other ways that you see helping the middle class?
We have a matrix of corporate powers that own Washington. At this point, I don't care whether the president is Democrat or Republican, they fall in line with big oil and they fall in line with the defense industry. We don't have universal health care because of the institutionalized greed of the insurance companies. We have over 1 million people rationing their insulin because of the institutionalized greed of the pharmaceutical companies. We have carcinogens in our food that are forbidden in other advanced democracies because of the institutionalized greed of big food. Chemicals in our pesticides that harm our children's brain because of chemical companies. Guns flooding our streets because of the institutionalized greed of gun manufacturers. We're ramping up rather than ramping down fossil fuel extraction because of big oil. And we have had wars in our lifetime that were, with all due respect to the military, not the military's fault, spectacular failures for no other reason than the institutionalized greed of the defense contractors. You stop giving your country to major behemoth multinational corporations that serve their own bottom line of short-term profit maximization for their stockholders before the safety, health, and well-being of the American people. Because of the money that floods Washington, particularly since the Citizens United decision. This is not left-right. Josh Hawley, he's a Republican senator who called the other day for the repeal of Citizens United. We really need to get this. These things aren't even left-right. The takeover of this country by huge corporate forces, this now supersedes democracy. You cannot have a thriving democracy when you do not have a thriving middle class. We need to repeal that 2017 tax cut, $2 trillion tax cut that gave 83 cents. You talk about the wealth inequality. Well, look at that tax cut. It gave 83 cents of every dollar to the richest earners and corporations. Now, there were middle class tax cuts in that. They need to be there. They should have been there before. So even when you repeal that tax cut, you put right back in the middle class tax cuts. And you stop subsidizing with multi-billion dollar. We give multi-billion dollar subsidies. And remember, when I say our government gives, that's our tax dollars, giving multi-billion dollar subsidies to huge corporations that are already making billions of dollars in profit. They say they need that money for manufacturing. Great. So they manufacture goods that then they sell back to the American people at price gouging records, including how this fuels inflation. So, and also I think we should have a wealth tax. I don't know why people have such a problem with saying to somebody with $50 million in assets, please give us 2 cents more, 2% more. I don't understand it. It will not affect their day. And if somebody has $1 billion in assets and you ask for an extra 1%, this will not affect their great grandchildren's day. So we have to understand what's happened with that $50 trillion transfer of wealth. And it was strategized. And it is, at this point, it's destroyed our middle class. And when you destroy the middle class in America, you're destroying our country.
Okay, wow. You're also running against Representative Dean Phillips of Minnesota. He said Democrats are sleepwalking into disaster because the Democrat Party right now is pursuing coronation instead of competition. What do you think about his comments?
I think he's 100% correct. You know, the Democratic Party right now, and I make a big distinction between the people of the United States and what I call the political media industrial complex. The divergence is profound. The people, listen, we're great. We're not better than people in other countries, but we are an eminently decent people. It's very inspiring running for president. And I found this 4 years ago too. The people are good. We're basically decent, intelligent people who wish to be noble and good. I believe that with all my heart. But we have a sclerotic political system that sort of sits on top of the will of the people. It's supposed to be facilitating democracy, not suppressing it or manipulating it. So the DNC says that they need to save democracy. And listen, I agree that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. I believe that as well. However, you don't save democracy by suppressing democracy. So what the DNC is doing right now, in this unbelievable elitist way, is they are doing everything to keep Dean Phillips and myself off the ballots. They are, in my case, invisibilizing me, erasing me from the conversation as much as possible. It's not good. We need more democracy in this country, not less democracy in this country. Thomas Jefferson said, the only safe repository for power is in the hands of the people. And George Washington, in his farewell address, warned us. He said that he was concerned that political parties would become factions of men more concerned with their party than with their country. We've got to get out of our silos. When I was growing up, and I grew up in a family of Democrats, right? But my mother's brothers, they were all Republicans. And, we go at it. We go at it. Don't listen to your father, kids. You'll never make any money. Don't listen to your uncle's kids. It won't survive the revolution. And then my mother would come in and say, okay, who wants roast beef and who wants chicken? We have to get back to that. And when we do, we find what Eisenhower said, that the American mind at its best is both liberal and conservative. The real axis is not left versus right. The real axis at this point is the powerful versus the powerless. And the powerful represent huge corporate interests and billionaire donors. And that's not even democracy. That's an oligarchy. I don't care if you're on the right or the left. This should horrify you. And they're dividing us so that we won't see, it's that don't look up thing. So, no, the people on your left are the problem. No, the people on your right are the problem. No, the people who are holding all the money and all the power that comes with that. Now, we were told the whole trickle-down economic theory was that putting more money in the hands of the stockholder and the CEO class, they would be job creators. But we all get it. Their business model is not job creation. Their business model is job elimination. Their business model is worker exploitation, union demonization. So I don't think that we lack a critical mass of Americans who realize that the entire political system is now held hostage by this donor class. Basically, Washington is a system of legalized bribery. So they're over there today talking about Hunter Biden or talking about whatever, as opposed to actually helping the American people get health care, pay their college costs, get into housing. They're not doing the work of the people. That's not what's going on over there. And the American people need to intervene.
Yeah, I like that. It's the powerful versus the powerless. I mean,
Exactly right.
Wall Street controls a lot of who gets elected. The military-industrial complex, the healthcare, big oil. These guys have way more influence than any of us realize. And I believe the majority of the country sits right in the middle. We're not
absolutely.
We're not super to the right. We're not super to the left. Most of us would get along. My wife shared a story with me one time where they put two different species of ants in a jar, and they lived really, really well together. And then somebody shook the jar, and they immediately started attacking each other. And wow. So I feel like there's like an invisible hand behind the country that is shaking the jar, trying to make us hate each other all the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely, there is. And that's, there was a book by Matt Taibbi. I don't know if you've ever interviewed him on your show, called Hate Inc. And it talks about how this started in the media. Roger Ailes started it. Then the left realized, we can make money that way. So now you got one major network who works totally for the GOP, another major network, these are cable, of course, working totally for the Democrats, another major who, we might argue, I think they're more for the Democrats now. And so instead of facilitating the public square in a meaningful, harmonious way, they're trashing it for their own profit. Many years ago, I was visiting, it would have been during the 90s. And I was visiting a very progressive congressman, Dennis Kucinich. I was visiting him at Congress, and we were going at the Capitol, and we were going upstairs to the lunchroom. The elevator door opened, and Lindsey Graham came out. Now, Lindsey Graham, as we know, is now a senator from South Carolina. At that time, he was a congressman from South Carolina, and he was one of the most rabid critics of President Clinton when he was going through his impeachment woes. I am just someone, who's watched television. The elevator door opens. I watch Lindsey Graham come out, and I watch Lindsey Graham and Dennis Kucinich. Hey, how you doing, Lindsey? Hey, Dennis. They hug each other. They high five. They whatever, like they're bros, like the best friends. And I get in the elevator. My mind can't even conceive it, what? And I'm kind of bristling, I think. Dennis says to me, "What's with you?" I said, "Well, Lindsey Graham, he's on television, the way he talks about Clinton, blah, blah, blah." He said, "Marianne, that's just television. He's a great guy. We work together all the time." He said, "That's just television." I thought to myself, oh, great. So they go out and they spew it into the ethers of the public.
Yeah, I saw something interesting that in the same vein where I don't know his name. He's a Republican, Gosar, Gosar, I think it is.
Yeah,
and he liked a video on Twitter where AOC, there was like a samurai cartoon, and the person that was AOC's character got attacked, and they said, "Oh, he's punching down on women. He hates all of this." But then during the time where they were trying to get the Speaker of the House with Kevin McCarthy, he and AOC, they're in the back laughing together. And there's video, and she's like, "Oh, that didn't happen, But yeah, they work together just fine, And RFK Jr. talks about this a lot, that his family used to invite people to come across the aisle, come have dinner with us, get to know our family. Let's work together. Your ideas are different than mine, but let's bring them together and find that middle road. And he felt like that was the way to move forward.
You know, I travel on airplanes a lot because I'm campaigning, but even in other aspects of my career, I did. And I love talking to people on airplanes because we don't have preconceived notions about people's politics. You don't even know this person. You find yourself in a conversation with them, but they're not bringing, oh, I know how you feel about so and so with them. And you can just enter a conversation from a much different place. And it's a much richer place because if all we do is talk to people who already agree with us, and then we end up turning on the people who already agree with us, it's not how nature made us. The diversification of opinion is what matters. You know, when I was a child, this before the Telecommunications Act in 1996, when I was a kid, the same company was forbidden by law to own the TV station and the radio station and the newspaper in a town because they were codifying into law a guarantee of the diversification of information. Now everybody just listens to what our side has to say. It's not only on these television stations, but also the algorithms in on our computers. We're not looking at the same story. And there's an American story. And that's what I say on the campaign all the time. I'm not going to talk differently to a Black audience as to a white audience, to a gay audience, to a straight audience, to a Jewish audience, to a Muslim audience, to a Christian audience. And I say to people all the time, after that word, Black American, Jewish American, Muslim American, white American, we need to have an American conversation right now. We're the United States, and we're disuniting ourselves. We complain about how separate we are, but then we ourselves, when we only speak from our silo, we're actually maintaining and perpetuating the separation. So I think all of us need to take responsibility for the repair work that has to be done in this country, because it's not all on the level of federal legislation, that's for sure.
Yeah. I sat in on a speech maybe 6 weeks ago with RFK Jr., and he talked about this idea that you've touched on, this corporate capture, where these large corporations and industries have infiltrated the government through bribes, donations, back scratching. I help your brother-in-law get this, all of those things. And he talked about the difficulty of breaking that up because it's so deeply entrenched. What thoughts have you given to how you might be able to break something like that up? Is it executive orders? Is it bringing in the right cabinet members? How do you do that?
Well, first of all, let's talk about what these agencies were created for to begin with. These agencies were created in order to advocate for the people. Okay. But they had been, as Bobby says, infiltrated by the very corporate forces whose overreach these agencies were created to protect us from. I remember several years ago, I was living in Michigan at the time. It would have been around 15, 20 years ago. And I visited the office of a congressman. And a young staffer came up to me and he said, well, what do we do about the dual function of the agencies? I said, what dual function? He said, well, our function is to advocate for the farmer, but our function is also to advocate for the big agricultural company. I said, no, it's not. Who told you it was dual advocacy? Who told you that? He said, well, that's just what we're supposed to do. I said, no, you're not. Big agricultural executives are not supposed to be running the agriculture department. But then you had someone under, I don't remember if it was Ronald Reagan or George Bush, where the Secretary, I think, of Agriculture, said, go big or go home. And he was the cabinet secretary, basically saying to the farmers of the United States, sell to the big to the forces of big agribusiness, or and they were forced to, basically, getting rid of local banks, making it too hard. There was a mayor in South Carolina who was telling me, he said before the 1980s, a farmer would come into the local bank, because there were so many local banks at that time, who knew you. The banker knew the farmer. It was a human interaction was involved, not this faceless behemoth corporate matrix, right? So the farmer would come in and say, my yield wasn't good this year. The local farmer would say, that's okay, we understand, you'll pay us next year. Then you get this whole trickle down, this whole corporatist takeover of America. Next thing you know, the small banker can't survive, replaced by some faceless banking company. They don't know these farmers. They don't know the state even necessarily. And the farmer comes in and says, my yield isn't good this year. And the banker says, too bad, you're just going to have to sell your farm. Not only have to sell your farm that your family might have owned for generations, you're going to have to sell it to some big agribusiness, because the big ones hang together. So the big banks, the big agribusiness, it's all the big, right? Big food, big chemical. The little businessman, the little farmer, we're pushed out of our own country, right? And then in addition to that, the farmer's having to practice agriculture in a way that is contradictory to everything his father and his grandfather taught him. Now, you asked me, what do you do about the corporate capture? The people who represent those big banks, the people who represent the big agriculture, the people who represent big food, they should not be running those agencies. That's not where they should be. The government should be of the people, by the people and for the people. Those were the words of Abraham Lincoln. And he said that the men who died at Gettysburg had died so that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people would not perish from the earth. The problem we have now, it's perishing. It's perishing. It's a government of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations. If those agencies are run by corporations, then we're government of the corporations. So yes, that's the first thing the president can do. The president's appointment of cabinet secretaries and the people who run those agencies. Otherwise, the whole dream of what's possible in this country is undercut. So on that issue, I very much agree with Robert Kennedy.
Okay, interesting. One of the big things that people are worried about is the cost of health insurance, housing, food, the basics, the kitchen table issues. You touched briefly on, taxing the wealthy more, but how do we make insurance more affordable? How do we make housing more affordable? Because I make fairly good money. I pay a lot in taxes. I don't always love that because of the way that my government spends money sometimes, but I do worry about other people. I have a heart. My Judeo-Christian belief tells me to look out for people. I also have 3 little children, and I wonder, how are they going to buy a house? How are they going to afford health insurance? How am I going to afford health insurance to take care of them? So these kitchen table issues, how do we do that? Is it restructuring the flow of tax money? Give me your thoughts on some of that.
I have we have to take a comprehensive.
Your microphone.
I thought it was the opposite. How about?
Yes. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I thought it was the opposite, and okay, forgive me. Okay. So I have an economic bill of rights. We need a comprehensive approach. It's not just incremental, a policy here, a policy there. We have to realize that what you just said is the average American's experience. And notice that you said that, and you're a man making a decent living. It's ridiculous. The people who are educated, who have decent jobs, 2 parents have the jobs, and they're still living with economic stress. Something's really off. So I want a comprehensive approach here. Number 1, Medicare for all, universal health care. This will be good for business, by the way, because businesses won't have to worry about that. That's number 1. Number 2, so many Americans are working at jobs they hate. The only reason they're there is because of the benefits, including health care. Free people from these invisible chains of economic constriction. You're going to have much more happiness, much more motivated employees, much more motivated employers. We're going to bring back the spirit of entrepreneurialism in America. People aren't going to be just like, I have to be here. That's not what made America great. What made America great is I'm going to make my dreams come true. People aren't free to make their dreams come true anymore because they don't have any available cash. How can you be a capitalist if you don't have any capital? So at this point, we need universal health care, which will actually stimulate the economy. We had a tuition-free college situation until the 1970s. We had a system in Florida. We had a system in California. We had a system in Texas. Every other advanced democracy has both of those things. Now, what they have in Australia is an interesting system. You can go to college at as high an achievement level as your own work will take you. And then when your tax records show that once you're out of school, you're starting to make a living and making a nice living, and you get to the point where starting to pay the government back does not impinge upon your quality of life, then the government starts paying it back. And everybody who is more highly educated creates more wealth anyway. These things are a stimulant to the economy and not the other way around. Now, as far as housing is concerned, we need a domestic Marshall Plan. We have up to 600,000 people who are homeless every night in the United States, many of whom, sometimes up to 50% of whom, are working, even working full time. This is outrageous. So you've got several factors here, including the fact that Wall Street is buying up whole neighborhoods. They're buying up houses and sitting on them. Those people should be taxed up the gazoo for doing that. And if that doesn't do the trick, then we should pass a law that if somebody actually would be living in that house, then they are the ones who should be able to put first dibs on it. Otherwise, they're just hiking up the prices beyond what people can afford. And young people, we have to, we call it a mental health crisis, but the mental health crisis in this country is a symptom. We have to look at the root causes, and that's the despair and the hopelessness people feel. We should be setting our young people up to win, not cutting them off at their knees. It's dangerous for the sustainability of our democracy that so many millions of people in college, even after college, I was reading in California, I think it was California, 1/5 of all the community college students are living in their cars. This is outrageous. So when you have young people, exactly what you said, I remember I was doing a college tour and I was speaking at Stanford. I said, you're one of the most elitist, highbrow universities in this country. And you know as well as I do, none of you feel really, really certain that you'll ever be able to afford the house you grew up in. And these kids all nodded their heads. I mean, and that's where these young people, and especially these kids with college loans. And, debt is crippling no matter what age we are. And 1 in 4 Americans live with medical debt, by the way. And by the way, if you put our medical debt, we have an $88 billion medical debt. If you look at the profits of the top 5 pharmaceutical companies in America last year, their profit was $80 billion. I mean, the American people are being milked, are just the life force of our economy. And at this point of our people, it's being just leached out of us by this terrible, terrible, unholy economic alliance between government and corporate interests. And it's a new status quo. It's not going to disrupt itself, and the people have to step in. And what that would mean in terms of housing is a domestic Marshall Plan. That's why one of the things in my Economic Bill of Rights is guaranteed affordable housing. We need to build between 5 and 10 million units of social housing, and we need to do it in a very different way. We need to do it much more in the way that many of these European countries do it, where it actually contributes to the social health of a community rather than even making it more segregated by money and opportunity. And that's where you really get some, when you have large groups of desperate people, that becomes a petri dish out of which all manner of societal, personal, every kind of dysfunction is almost inevitable. And that includes vulnerability to ideological capture by genuinely psychotic forces. If we just continue with the Trumps and the Bidens, we're just going to continue. Are they divergent? Yes, they're very divergent. But economically, on a fundamental level, not nearly as divergent as they should be. And, I'm a Democrat. I'm a Roosevelt Democrat. I believe that the function of government, I believe in the Declaration of Independence. I think that's our vision statement. It's our North Star. Inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. A homeless person is not free to pursue happiness. A person who knows that there's so many carcinogens in our food, 46 of our urban wells filled with PFAS. It says in the Declaration that governments are instituted to secure those rights, not thwart those rights, not undercut those rights, not diminish those rights or chip away at those rights. And the Declaration says that if the government is not doing its job, it's the right of the people to alter it. And that's what elections are. And we need a massive run on the ballot box in 2024 so that the American people can demonstrate that we've been played. We know we've been played, and we're not going to be fooled any longer.
Yeah. Your comments reminded me of a story I heard in college where the CFO of a large company comes to the CEO and says, we're spending millions of dollars educating our employees and getting them new skills. What if they leave? And the CEO says, if we don't, what if they stay? What if we stop investing in our people? Yes, they're going to leave, but we want, people from, educated backgrounds to come in as new blood. And I feel like it's time for the government to invest in the American people and stop investing in these corporations, these wars. I would love to see a different United States where we are more united. We're focused on making sure that we can all have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Well, the way it works today, the first thing we have to do is to realize that's not the way it is. That's the way it should be. When you say the government investing, that's what's so awful. It's our money. Our money. That's your tax dollars. You said before. It's not that we mind paying our taxes. We mind where our taxes are going. Your tax dollars are being used so that a very, very few people who already have more than enough can have more at the expense of the majority of people, even able to get by, to have the bandwidth and the time to be there for their spouses, for their children. If a man has to work 2 and 3 jobs to put food on the table, this needs fundamental repair. We need a fundamental economic U-turn. And I think for someone like myself, I remember, and I'm not whitewashing or glamorizing or romanticizing American capitalism when I was growing up, but it was not like this. It was not such a cutthroat society. And when you were talking about who the American people are, you were right with what you said. Poll after poll, we're a little left of center on the issues. But to hear the way the media describes it, the way the political parties play it, the fringe on either side are the only people at play here. Yeah. We need it's what Martin Luther King said, we need a coalition, a new coalition of conscience. We need a new coalition of decency and respect for the founding principles of this country and for the right of the average American to live with dignity on one job. Back in the 70s, one salary could support a family of 4. That's someone who has the bandwidth. Be there for your spouse, be there for your kids, be there for your local community, be there for your neighbors. People don't even have time. People's lives are too hard in such a rich country. But I think in terms of as someone running for president, my point is that's not going to change it unless we change it. Yeah. That's not going to change unless we, the people, step in now.
Yeah, great. Well, Marianne, thank you so much for coming on. This has been an enjoyable conversation. Nice to hear the other side, where we agree, where we maybe disagree. But thank you very much. I wish you all the best in the rest of your presidential run. Is Marianne2024.com the best place for people to go and learn more?
Yes, and that's Marianne, Marianne2024.com.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You as well. Thank you so much.